the early years of the 1930s, Britain still lived in the long afternoon of the biplane. Along grass airfields from Kent to Hampshire, fabric-covered fighters with two wings braced by wire and strut sat in the pale English light. Machines that had changed little in spirit since the last Great War. They were nimble and beautiful in their way, but slow. And the men who watched the skies for a living understood that the world was tilting beneath them. Across the North Sea, Germany was rearming, quietly at first and then with open ambition. And the airplane was becoming something more dangerous than a curiosity. Speed was rising everywhere. Metal was replacing wood and canvas. The future of air power belonged to the fast monoplane. And Britain, for all its proud aviation heritage, did not yet have one worthy of the coming storm. The problem was clear to those willing to see it. What the Royal Air Force needed was not an improved biplane, but an entirely new kind of fighter. A single-seat monoplane built of metal, capable of far higher speeds than anything then in squadron service, armed heavily enough to destroy a modern bomber in seconds, and fitted with an undercarriage that folded away in flight to cut drag. Such an aircraft did not yet exist in British hangars. The older fighters could barely exceed 250 miles an hour, and their light armament of two machine guns belonged to another age. Designing the machine that could close that gap would demand not only engineering skill but a leap of imagination, and it would fall to a company on the water's edge at Southampton to make that leap. That company was Supermarine, a subsidiary of the great armaments firm Vickers Armstrongs, and its chief designer was a quiet, determined Midlander named Reginald Joseph Mitchell. Mitchell was no stranger to speed. Through the 1920s and into the early 1930s, he had designed a series of sleek racing float planes for the Schneider Trophy, the international contest that drove aircraft designers to extract every last mile an hour from engine and airframe. His Supermarine S5S, 6, and finally the S16B were among the fastest machines on Earth. In 1931, the SS6B won the Schneider Trophy, outright for Britain, securing permanent possession of the coveted cup, and later that same year it pushed the world airspeed record beyond 400 miles an hour, a figure almost unimaginable to the pilots of contemporary service fighters. Those racing seaplanes taught Mitchell and his team lessons about streamlining, cooling, and high-powered engines that no textbook could offer. Yet the road from racer to fighter was not smooth. Mitchell's first attempt to build a modern monoplane fighter, the Supermarine Type 224 designed to an Air Ministry specification, was a disappointment. It had a thick, cranked wing, a fixed and heavily faired undercarriage, and an evaporatively cooled engine that proved troublesome. It was slow and ungainly, and the contract went elsewhere. A lesser designer might have accepted the verdict and moved on. Mitchell instead pressed forward on his own terms, and Supermarine, backed by Vickers, chose to develop a far more advanced design as a private venture rather than wait for official instruction. This new aircraft carried the internal designation Type 300, and in it, Mitchell and his colleagues began to gather every hard-won lesson into a single coherent shape. The most distinctive feature of that shape was its wing. To reduce drag while leaving room inside for guns, ammunition, and a retracting undercarriage, the design team settled on a thin wing with a graceful elliptical planform, its leading and trailing edges curving in smooth arcs to the rounded tip. The aerodynamicist Beverly Shenstone, a Canadian working under Mitchell, played a central part in refining that wing, for the ellipse offered an efficient distribution of lift and allowed the wing to be made thin without sacrificing the internal volume the guns demanded. The whole airframe was built as an all-metal stressed skin structure, its aluminium alloy covering carrying much of the load rather than merely clothing an internal frame. This monocoque approach produced a fuselage and wing that were both light and immensely strong, a decisive break from the wood and fabric traditions of the biplane era. At the heart of the machine, lay an engine that would become almost as famous as the aircraft it powered. Rolls-Royce had been developing a new 12-cylinder, liquid-cooled engine of around 27 liters, arranged in a V, which the company initially called the PV-12, the letters standing for private venture, for like the fighter itself, it had begun without a government order. In time, this engine took the name Merlin, and in its early service forms it produced well over 1,000 horsepower, a figure that transformed what the airframe could achieve. Mated to that power, the slender fighter was designed to carry a formidable battery of 8 303-inch Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing, concentrating a weight of fire that could tear into an enemy aircraft in a brief burst. With the Merlin at its nose and its clean, drag-minimizing lines, the prototype promised a top speed in the region of 350 miles an hour, far beyond the fighters it was meant to replace. The decisive moment came on the 5th of March 1936 at the Eastleigh Aerodrome near Southampton. There the prototype, bearing the Air Ministry serial K5054, stood ready for its first flight, its unpainted metal skin gleaming, its propeller a simple wooden air screw. At the controls sat Joseph Summers, chief test pilot of Vickers, a man universally known as Mutt, whose judgment was trusted across the British aircraft industry. He lifted the machine into the air, flew a short and careful circuit, and brought it safely down. The flight lasted only minutes, but it was enough to reveal that something remarkable had taken shape at Supermarine. A story long attached to that day holds that Summers, on landing, asked that nothing be altered, a remark sometimes taken to mean the aircraft was already near perfect, though in truth much refinement still lay ahead. What was beyond doubt was the sense of promise. Here at last was a fighter that felt like the future. Behind that triumph, however, lay a private tragedy. Mitchell was gravely ill. He had been diagnosed with cancer some years earlier, and even as his greatest design took to the air, the disease was advancing. He continued to involve himself in the aircraft's development as far as his strength allowed, but his time was running short. On the 11th of June 1937, Reginald Mitchell died at the age of just 42. He did not live to see his fighter enter squadron service, nor to witness the role it would play in his country's survival. The work of turning the prototype into a practical mass-produced weapon passed to his colleague Joseph Smith, who took over as chief designer at Supermarine, and who would guide the aircraft through years of continuous improvement, shepherding it from its first form through mark after mark of increasing power and capability. Turning that elegant prototype into a fighter the RAF could field in numbers proved far harder than anyone had expected. The very features that made the aircraft superb, above all its thin, curved, elliptical wing, made it difficult and slow to build, for the complex shapes demanded skilled labor and specialized tooling that a company more used to small production runs struggled at first to provide. Early manufacturing fell behind schedule, and there were anxious months when it seemed the fighter might not reach the squadrons in time. Gradually, the difficulties were overcome, subcontractors were brought in, and production found its rhythm. The first examples were delivered to the Royal Air Force in the summer of 1938, going to number 19th Squadron based at Duxford, in the flat country of Cambridgeshire, where pilots accustomed to biplanes now climbed into a sleek metal monoplane that felt like a machine from another era entirely. The prototype itself did not long survive. K5054, the aircraft that had first proven the design, was lost in a landing accident in the autumn of 1939, only weeks after Britain went to war, killing its pilot. By then, the fighter's future no longer rested on a single machine. To build Spitfires in the quantities the coming war would demand, production spread far beyond Supermarine's cramped works on the Southampton waterfront, which was itself heavily bombed in 1940. A vast new shadow factory at Castle Bromwich, near Birmingham, was tooled up to turn out the fighter on an industrial scale. and after a troubled start, it became the largest single source of Spitfires in the country. What had begun as the meticulous handwork of a small design team became the output of thousands of workers across a dispersed network of plants. By then, the aircraft had acquired the name by which the world would remember it. According to the accounts that have come down, the name Spitfire was chosen by Sir Robert McLean, the chairman of Vickers Armstrongs, an old term of affection he was said to have used for his spirited young daughter. There is a well-known irony attached to it, for Mitchell himself is reported to have disliked the name, considering it faintly ridiculous for a serious weapon of war. Yet the name stuck, carrying just the right blend of fire and defiance, and it would soon be spoken with pride and gratitude far beyond the factories and airfields of southern England. The test of everything Mitchell and his team had built came in the summer and autumn of 1940. As the Battle of Britain raged over the fields of Kent and Sussex and the streets of London, the Spitfire fought alongside the more numerous Hawker Hurricane to defend the country against the German Air Force. The Hurricane, sturdy and available in greater numbers, bore much of the burden, but it was the Spitfire, faster and a match for the best German fighters, that captured the imagination of a nation and came to symbolize its resistance. In those weeks, the fighter that had begun as a private venture on the water's edge at Southampton helped decide the fate of a country and, some would argue, of a war. The Spitfire's story did not end there. Throughout the conflict, it was developed without pause, its Merlin engines giving way in later versions to the still more powerful Griffon, its wings, armament, and equipment altered again and again to meet each new demand. More than 20,000 Spitfires were built across a long succession of marks, making it one of the most produced British aircraft of the war, and the only British fighter to remain in continuous production from before the conflict to its end. Long after the guns fell silent, the aircraft retained its hold on the imagination. Today, a number of airworthy Spitfires still take to the skies at air shows and commemorations, their Merlin engines filling the air with the sound that a generation once listened for with hope. In their curving wings and gleaming lines lives the vision of a dying designer and the memory of the machine that was built against the odds, just in time.